We do have our eyes on Wilmington, Delaware for the federal gun trial involving Hunter Biden. We did hear the beginning of testimony yesterday, including an FBI agent introducing an audio recording of a book written by Hunter Biden where he describes in great detail his drug use. With us now, defense and trial attorney Misty Marris. Counselor, great to see you this morning. When you hear a defendant in his own voice reading an audio book like that, what's the impact on a jury? Because it's not the defendant testifying, but it almost is, right?
Exactly, John. So here's what I found so interesting about that. Usually the defendant does not take the stand. So it's very rare that the jury hears directly from them. So hearing this audiobook, which Hunter Biden recorded in his own voice, was very impactful for the jury, but I think it can cut both ways. So on one hand, prosecutors are going to argue, you're hearing him tell you, this is Hunter Biden, the defendant, sitting right there at that table, tell you about his drug addiction, about the nature and extent and the frequency that he was actually doing drugs and his addiction. On the flip side, you have a couple of people on that jury, a significant portion of them, who have had family members or friends or have otherwise been impacted by addiction. So I think on the flip side, from the defense perspective, that could be a really, really sympathetic element that could be applied to Hunter Biden, especially when you're talking about the sensitivity of addiction and the potential for relapse. So very powerful, but powerful in two different scenarios and maybe effective for each side in a different way.
You know, interesting that you bring up a possible defense angle here, because I do think a lot of people went into this trial thinking, what is Hunter Biden going to argue to try to get a not guilty or at least a hung jury here? But we are beginning to see a strategy here. One, engender sympathy, like you're suggesting right there. And then number two, get into the technicality of what it means to be using or abusing drugs when you're filling out the form, because this has to do with a form. These charges with a form that Hunter Biden filled out when he was purchasing a gun that basically asked him to attest to the fact that he wasn't abusing or addicted to drugs. And the defense seems to be literally that Hunter Biden wasn't doing it when he signed his name, the minute he signed his name. Where's the law? How do you split that hair?
Yeah, so absolutely. This seems like a very cut and dry case. Prosecutors say, look at the form. He was addicted at the time. We're going to show you a lot of evidence that that was the case, and he lied on the form. Now, the defense, as you said, taking a different angle, saying the focus on this idea of knowingly. He was knowingly falsifying the document with the intent to deceive. That would require Hunter Biden identifying himself as an addict at the time. And the defense goes a step further. They say that actually he wasn't using drugs at the time. And you're looking at a prosecutor's timeline, a heavy-handed timeline that leaves out a critical time period, meaning the time right before and at the time Hunter Biden is filling out the form. The defense said anything that happens after was a relapse, and addicts often relapse. It's a terrible tragedy when it comes to drug addiction. So Hunter Biden was not viewing himself as an addict, and therefore, when he filled out the form, he wasn't knowingly deceiving or knowingly lying. So it's going to require the jury to really take a look at the words on that form. And as the defense pointed out, it doesn't say, have you used, are you using? It says, have you been addicted to drugs or currently addicted to drugs? So that is going to be something that's going to ask the jury to parse out. But honestly, John, it's exactly what you want to do from a defense perspective, because your job is not to prove the case, it's to raise reasonable doubt. So he just wants to get a couple of jurors on that narrative to really think about that aspect.
So if you're the prosecution, you know this. You know that this is how the defense will try to inject doubt in there. How do you get around that? Do you put people who knew, people who were romantically involved with Hunter Biden on the stand, can you ask them, was Hunter Biden addicted to drugs on that day?
Absolutely. That's what they're going to try and do. They knew that timeline was going to be of a concern, because a lot of what we saw come out in the courtroom yesterday from Hunter Biden's laptop, which is corroborating his own account in his memoir, text messages, they're from the day after. Some of the most critical text messages happen the day after. So of course the prosecutors are going to try and use other evidence, such as you said, witness testimony from those who were romantically involved in him with him about his drug use, who knew him at the time. You can also see other evidence coming into play that the prosecutors are admitting. For instance, large withdrawals of cash. Prosecutors are going to say that that is common practice of those who purchase and take drugs, to use cash as opposed to other means of payment. So we're seeing how the prosecutors are going to put together other types of evidence in order to get ahead of the defense timeline issue. So that's why you see the defense focusing so much on state of mind, because if the prosecutors are able to throw in that circumstantial evidence in addition to the real documentary evidence, well, then the defense can rely on state of mind as a defense.
All right, we will watch this develop today. One of the most interesting aspects will be the cross-examination of people who at one point were very close with Hunter Biden. The choices the defense counsel has to make here will be fascinating. Misty Marris, thank you very much. Kate?